We are now streaming to YouTube and recording.
No, that's right. Yeah. We don't have one on this wall. We talked about it. Flat screen.
Okay, we'll open this council hearing. Today is April 20th, 2021. The time is 6 p.m. The city council open hearing is being held to consider the dismissal or discipline of Councilor Topaz based on the recent investigation. This will be conducted as an open hearing as requested by Councilor Topaz. It is an open hearing where the public is able to participate, not an adversary hearing. On Friday, April 16th, Councilor Topaz's attorney requested that the hearing be rescheduled. The request was denied by the council, set the meeting date and time of April 7th. In addition, there is no requirement that the city grant a postponement under the Attorney General's Records and Meetings Manual, which provides guidance. The hearing is not being held to continue hearing the findings of the investigation. Instead, to allow the council to consider whether to impose discipline. The hearing will be conducted as follows. Attorney Pete Hicks will present the background of the investigation. The council has held 3 executive sessions to review the results of this investigation in exempt records, public records. Councilor Topaz has had an opportunity to attend each of the executive sessions to hear the report. He attended 2 of the 3 executive sessions. After the presentation, Councilor Topaz and his representative will be given time to speak. Citizens will then be given an opportunity to provide comment in accordance with council rules and procedures. That means each speaker will have up to 5 minutes to provide comments. Council will then discuss whether it wishes to consider discipline based on the results of the investigation of the hearing input. Council may ask staff and attorneys for its options. At the conclusion of this hearing, the council has the option to give direction to the next step if it determines that discipline is merited. The council may direct the staff and city attorneys to develop and return a potential action at a future council meeting. Okay, so now we will turn it over to have Peter Hicks give us a review on where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So we thought it'd be helpful to give some background as to how the investigation started, the process the investigation went through, and what we'll talk about today is what the allegations that were investigated and those findings with respect to those allegations. We're not releasing the report. We have determined that that's not something we do based upon attorney-client privilege. You know, and the contents of the report have been discussed in full with Mr. Topaz on 2 separate occasions, and the opportunity he had to review the report was at a meeting that he did not attend. So, for background, this investigation started in September 16th of 2020, when the council authorized an investigation following a public comment that was made on September 2nd that raised concerns related to potential harassment, discrimination, and some concerns that Councilor Topaz was using personal gain. Based upon those allegations, the council authorized an investigation, and as the city's attorney, we retained Jill Goldsmith, who is an attorney herself and works with Workplace Solutions. Jill conducted an extensive investigation beginning in November, and in November she attempted her first contact with Councilor Topaz. As part of the investigation, it's always customary practice to give the person who's the subject of the investigation an opportunity to participate, to one, fill them in on the nature of the allegations, the content of the allegations, and two, to obviously allow them to respond. Ms. Goldsmith reached out, and our office reached out to Councilor Topaz on 8 separate occasions. Councilor Topaz initially declined to participate in the investigation until he said his attorney would be available in January, some 2 months after the investigation started. In January, we again attempted to reach out. Joe Goldsmith did after Councilor Topaz said his attorney would be available, and Councilor Topaz failed to respond. Given Councilor Topaz's failure to respond over 8 different occasions, Joe Goldsmith determined he didn't want to participate and move forward with the investigation and put her findings and conclusions together. During the course of the investigation, Ms. Goldsmith interviewed 15 different witnesses, interviewed numerous documents, including council records and records of council meetings, in order to try to substantiate or not substantiate the allegations. Ms. Goldsmith looked at essentially 5 separate allegations during the investigation. What I'll do is go through each of those allegations, and I'll let you know kind of Ms. Goldsmith's response and conclusion with respect to those allegations. Again, we're not going to go into detail with respect to each allegations. That's been shared with the council on a couple of different occasions. And we want to be careful to make sure we're preserving confidentiality of the complainants and also the witnesses, because there were concerns referenced by people that there was retaliation that occurred before that would occur. So we're trying to protect those folks during this whole process. All right. So the allegations, in summary, were 5. The first allegation was that Councilor Topaz had attempted to use his position as city councilor to cause the city to perform work on his personal residence because of a flooding problem the building historically had, and that he had maintained a grudge against a particular city employee due to her role in the 2009 stormwater and sewer project. Based upon the investigation findings, the investigator found that Councilor Topaz had attempted to use his position as a city councilor to cause the city to perform work on the personal residence, and had attempted to harm the employee in her employment in retaliation for her role in representing the city when Councilor Topaz sued the city in 2012. Significantly, the investigator noted that Councilor Topaz attempted to put his personal residence on a list of city projects during the budget meeting in April of 2019. That interaction was recorded in the council minutes related to that April 9, 2019 meeting. With respect to the second allegation, the allegation was that Councilor Topaz had bullied staff, spread false statements about them, and they behaved in a discriminatory manner. The investigator concluded that Councilor Topaz has in fact behaved in an inappropriate, unprofessional, and sometimes bullying manner towards staff. Those were often identified or verified by comments during public meetings that were based upon her review. Again, Councilor Topaz declined to participate in the investigation, so he did not offer his view or his version of what had happened. The third allegation was that employees had stated that Councilor Topaz had used his position as a city councilor to attempt to harm an employee in her employment by trying to have her fired, attempting to block her legitimate attempt to be promoted, and otherwise use his position in an inappropriate manner due to his personal and discriminatory bias. That allegation was also sustained or substantiated, and the investigator found that Councilor Topaz had in fact attempted to block the female employee's application for employment, although his attempts or application for promotion, although his attempts have been unsuccessful because the city had blocked those attempts, the council had, and he behaved in a manner that was both betraying a personal and a gender bias toward the employee. The fourth allegation was that Councilor Topaz had made inoffensive statements reflecting poorly on the city in violation of city policies, diversity resolution, and ethics code, and they used his elected position to bully or harass staff. That allegation was also substantiated, and the investigator found that Councilor Topaz had used a number of inappropriate terms, including referring to disabled individuals statements reflecting poorly on the city in violation of city's policies. And it referred to Latinos in a derogatory manner, and also repeatedly used the N-word when referring to a local canyon in an area that was previously known under a prior name around the turn of the century. Fifth allegation was that Councilor Topaz had used his platform as a city councilor to make defamatory, insulting, or untrue statements about city staff publicly, directly, and in local media. The investigator sustained or substantiated that allegation as well, indicating that Councilor Topaz had made untrue comments about city staff and local media or written articles or letters, including making an unfounded allegation in the Spotlight newspaper in June 28th of 2019, including claiming that he had been silenced when records and meetings from council minutes had indicated that he had not been silenced and had an opportunity to contribute on a number of occasions. So that is the sum total of the investigation, and those are the conclusions that were offered. Again, Councilor Topaz had multiple opportunities to offer his response to those allegations, including the 8 different attempts for contact by the investigator, the March 17, 2021 council meeting executive session when the report was shared with Councilor Topaz. During the March 17th session, the council elected to have an in-person meeting on March 31st, where the entire investigation will be provided to Councilor Topaz and the other councilors. Councilor Topaz elected not to attend that meeting. And again, the investigation was discussed on April 7th, 2021 during the council meeting executive session. When Councilor Topaz was asked to comment, he indicated that he would wait for his attorney to respond. He did not offer any additional comment. And that's where we are at this point.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Topaz and his representative, trying to speak.
On having meetings that I couldn't attend was nice thing in the hospital, but I'm glad you put forth that I didn't attend. There's a whole lot of things that were said. Maybe the N word that you brought up was spoken, believe it or not, in front of the city council. It was also spoken in front of city members. And city council, as you did, raised the problem with Mr. Topaz was kind of negative. This was recorded. It was recorded in a courtroom. It was recorded over 10 years ago. And the judge at the time replied that Mr. Topaz replied correctly in a legal manner, both historically and legally. So bringing this up, that a legal response is inappropriate is very good. Like the I can't remember ever asking for anybody to do anything on my property. I have asked for the stormwater problem in our neighborhood to be fixed. The Clear Water Act says you're supposed to have sanitary sewer sealed, and when you do that, you supply an alternate way for stormwater. The city indeed sealed the sanitary sewer. Unfortunately, they did not put any pipes in for the stormwater. The city's engineering inspection before, that area was 45 times the amount of water comes into that area when it rains. And it was noted when the sewer system was put in 1913 that it was always a wet area that needed to be drained. So when the sewer was upgraded, it's known as INI, the city stopped collecting the stormwater that was supposed to be collected both by the Clear Water Act, the federal act, and the city's determination when they put the sewer in 1913. Now, there's another thing the city did which is negligible at the time, and I'm glad you didn't mention it. because the city at that time was dumping sewer into the Columbia River. This is 1960. And the EPA says you can't do that. So this is when the sewer plant was built. A similar problem was with the mills. We built the cooling pond and lagoon. And what would have to happen to get the sewage from my area to the other area is you had to have a pump station and run sewage down 4th Street going south rather than into the park. And to do that, we used a 30-inch concrete line, which is very good. Because what that did was raise the street, so the street level is now above the sidewalk. So the city now is dumping water, not only on my property, very little on my property, but the rest of my neighbors both on 3rd and 4th Street. At the same time, the city closed off the storm drains. So now the water that starts coming down St. Helens Street, going from the top of St. Helens Street between 2nd and 3rd Street, comes down, cuts across 3rd Street, goes across the sidewalk, and floods the backyard. In fact, John Walsh was with me one day when we were having an inspection, and there's 4 inches of water going into one of my neighbor's basement, and John was there to see that. So requesting that probably take care of as an undue request for the city to take care of my property is a little iffy. Now, when we had this trial over 10 years ago, the state geologist or ex-geologist who's in private practice mentioned that we're draining 5 blocks of water into my back area, which is not being collected by the sewer system or a drain system now. But at the same time, the city, on the top of Nob Hill, is going at the 1 block area, you put in 2 lines. One sewer line, which had to be fixed, which was leaking a little bit, and they never drilled a drain line. So if you're on top of the Nob Hill and in front of the city, you get storm drainage and sewer drainage. If you're dividing the hill, you're draining 5 areas, no problem. But one of the more interesting things about this line, and this was reported to the state licensing board, is part of the line, the water has to flow uphill from one catch basin to another to get out. And another one of those little, it's okay because water flows uphill in St. Helens, is that some of the storm drains are put on 3rd Street. There are 4 drains, none of them are the low spot, but one drain you can identify when it rains because it's 1 inch above the water level, and the water level that's going out goes into the sewer system, which is supposed to protect. So talking about having an engineering department that designs things well is not really good. In fact, they are defaulting in understanding gravity. Now, bringing this engineering problem or deficit to the licensing board said, we have no authority to do anything about it. But they said, Mr. Topaz said he's a professional engineer and he's not, and so they were going to fine him. Good. So we went to, my attorney and I went to the administrative court. The administrative court said, Mr. Topaz did nothing wrong. They had 5 things that I did, which was absolutely correct. And as a courtesy, they pointed out to tell people that they're a professional engineer, which I am, but licensed in another state. Well, we go along, and the next court, Court of Appeals, says Mr. Topaz violated Oregon law because he's telling publicly that there's a problem, and that's against the rules. We lost that case. We took it to the Oregon Supreme Court. We pointed out the same problem, and the Supreme Court said Mr. Topaz is not allowed to talk about this problem, and the fact that it's proving 5 other properties is still, we cannot talk about it. So as I'm talking about these things, the Supreme Court, the Appeals Court, the state of Oregon says it's illegal to talk about problems, which is good. Recently, within the last year and a half. It was a similar complaint by an engineer. It was the state's licensing board that he was making public statements and interfering with the government, and he shouldn't be doing that. So he took it to the federal court, and the federal court said, we'll shake hands, everything's okay. The federal court says you can't do that because of Topaz. Mr. Topaz's First Amendment rights were violated as you're violating this, and there were some other things that the state did. So we're spending a lot of money here. By the way, how much money have you collected from the city on all this investigation? Can you tell me? 100,000, 150,000?
Couldn't tell you, it's later today.
Oh, so you don't, but the longer you go, the more you get. Good show.
The reason we're going longer is because we've been waiting for you to respond.
You don't give a man a board, nails, rope, build his own hanging thing. You have not told me what I've done wrong. If you're telling me what I did 11 years ago and you made a big deal about that. Now, the other thing which I find a little bit upsetting, you talk about me bad-mouthing the Chinese. Unfortunately, I work with a number of Chinese at a couple of universities. So I find that somewhat slanderous. I also work internationally with the Chinese, and I have been told by the federal government about how the Chinese are following me in some of the scientific work I do. So your quick thing about, now I use the word cripples or crips. How many of you have worked with crippled people or people who are handicapped? How many of you have built equipment for them and built things that keep them alive and studied them? I have a working relationship with them. Not a political relationship, but a working relationship. But you're taking my work connection away from me by saying it's terrible. Okay, good. So what are you talking about? I'm an engineer, I make decisions based on good engineering. If people are inadequate, I would say so. If that keeps them from getting a job, that's my job. Now we have another problem. And this is where one of the citizens came to me and said, we've got a problem with the water reservoir, the way it's being fixed. So I went up to look at it, and I wasn't allowed to look at it. And I was told that the project manager, Tim, the inspector, wouldn't let me see it. I didn't know that Tim was qualified. One of the things I also found out was that the fluid leaks into the reservoir as well as leaks out. So Mr. Topaz is bringing up the point that we have an unholy problem, and there should have been someone on that project 24/7 because of the public health. And the fact they're not doing it, Mr. Topaz said that person isn't qualified. And the fact I've been in the hospital business and having a possible infection going to a whole community is what my job is. In fact, that's, if you take a look at the oath that a professional engineer takes, even if his own job is in jeopardy, he is to protect the public health. And that is not being done by our engineering department. Okay? Now there's another problem that we brought up. When they were cleaning out this 1.5 gallon reservoir, they ground a whole bunch of stuff and flushed it down the stream. Where we talked to the EPA about that. And the EPA says, oh, you can't dump that much water in your stream without a permit. You can't dump chlorinated water into the stream. You just can't. So we've got some major engineering problems going, and people who do that shouldn't be hired, should not be even working here. And now me doing a job is considered bad, because we're bothering the good friends of the city staff. Good. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me many years ago, which has kind of framed my life. One of the things that I was involved in, this would be 1972, is building the field monitor. This thing you stick a enormous belly to watch the field apart and the contractions to know whether the child is doing okay or it's being born. One particular day we had a doozy. We monitored the child 30 seconds and we were off to do a C-section. It was, the child had a triple wrap. It was a Hollywood style West. At the end of the day, we're sitting there, and it's one of those days where you're holding the coffee cup with both hands. Because that's how much energy we use up. And I mentioned to the people, you know, they never said thank you. And Dr. Popper said, you know, Steve, our job is saving lives, not getting thanks. The fact that people are getting ticked off at me is not my problem. My job is getting the job done. It's keeping costs down in the city. It's keeping people healthy. If that means getting rid of people, that's what I do. If you take what I say the wrong way and get upset, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not politically correct. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions which I've never gotten answers to. I asked one answer how much money we had spent for the chemicals needed to knock down flooring and we dumped the water into the stream. And he referred me to another person. Okay. Yeah, he's the one that if you take a look at the reports, every council meeting, this is the money we spent. These things are detailed ad nauseum. There's never been information on that. So, I went and found out. I found out a year later. But the next meeting after I asked the question, the director of finance has a 6-page document that he's reading how much this question bothered him. He told me to go to him, email him, or talk to him somehow privately, and he's giving me the answer. And it was bothering him so much, his family, and he couldn't sleep and all that. Couldn't care less, people, but I didn't get the answer. Now, as I say, we're dumping a few million gallons a couple of times down the stream. That's illegal according to the EPA. I'm trying to keep the city out of that problem, but I'm getting yelled at because I kept somebody from sleeping. Now, it was also mentioned that I knew the answer. Why did I ask? Well, I knew the answer basically a year and a half after I asked him. And the way I got the answer was I called up people who make the equipment and said, how much does it cost and what do you do? So I know how much it costs to do it. I do not know where the city spent that money. And according to what I've seen in the bills, the equipment and the type of chemicals were never used. So the city is illegally dumping water. Now, another engineering detail, the city's engineers drilled the core out of concrete. And they mentioned that the seal, the coating the contractor was putting on it, didn't stick. And I looked at it, and it parted company correct, but it parted company by taking the concrete with it. So the inspector wasn't there, the city engineer wasn't there, when the surface was prepared, because the surface was not prepared correctly. And now I'm being told that I'm blocking this person's employment. Yes, I am. That person should be fired. Because we've got a whole lot of money tied up. We've got a whole lot of coke tied up in that tank. We also have the problem that it looks like the water coming out of that tank, if you go downhill, a number of the homes in that area downhill from that have got water problems where they have to put substance. Okay? Now, back to the zoning. I always like this one. And the city's done this before. And this is, again, one of those things that came in. When they put the drain line in, the city finally tried to get a storm drain line into my area. And they started off with a storm drain on Gum Way. And the idea is to dig a ditch up to my place. Basically a block way, one way, half a block there. After 4 feet of digging, they get the salt. So the city engineer did not tell the contractor that he was gonna have to chop rock. The thing that's important to know about this, remember I mentioned about that big 30-inch concrete pipe that took the sewer from our area down to the sewer plant? Good, because that's 8 feet away from this, and they had a chop rock, and the city engineer did not feel it was necessary to indicate that there was rock there. That's a huge cost. Now, I also enjoy, I can't ever remember anybody saying take care of my property. Really good. But I have paperwork that shows our engineer telling the contractor to take care of the particular person was there a politician, was a politically important person. That, oh, I got that by the way. When we had the court case, you asked for information, and the city dumped a whole lot of stuff on us, as lawyers do. And here's this letter from our city engineer telling the contractor to take special care of certain people because they're politically connected. Good show. Now, if you think that makes me upset, it does. When I ask how much money we've been paid, and this is one of the things I've come back with, and a number of people have asked me to redo it, and I've been told by the mayor, we've already answered that, we're not gonna tell you why you keep asking again. Okay. One of the questions is how much money have we gotten from rent from the marijuana growing facility? The contract that originally started out as a rent to buy, so the company that is doing this pays the city nothing for 10 months. No money down, nothing for 10 months. After 10 months, they pay $10,000 a month for a particular time, then $15,000 a month for a particular time, then $20,000, and now it's $30,000. And right now, if we run the numbers up, the city should have been paid $720,000, which, according to them, it hasn't. According to the state, on a credit card, they bought their license on a private credit card. I've been told that permits and licenses have been paid, but I have not been told to find out how much has been paid for the rent. Now, if you look at the contract, you find out something else, which is bad business. When we have, the city has somebody build sidewalks or something, there's a whole pile of all the places. This is the insurance you gotta have, and it goes odd missing page on page, and pretty much every contract says the same thing. This company that's using our property to grow marijuana does not have any insurance. There's no liability insurance, no workers' compensation insurance. Anything happens on that facility, the city pays for. They don't want to talk about that. I've asked a number of times about no. Now, the other thing that I'm going back to my first day is a councilman, you get sworn in and you say, I swear to follow the Constitution of the United States, the laws of Oregon, and so on. Constitution, the federal law says you don't have marijuana, it's illegal to grow, and yet the city allows that. The state of Oregon says you don't grow marijuana on city property. The city is doing that. If you want to say I'm bothering people by bringing that up, go for it, because I am. I'm going to go back again, reminisce about way back when. I'm going to go back to those delivery ward rooms. You know what a child looks like from a drug addict? You know what the drug addict looks like? If you think any way I'm going to accept building material that does that, you really are bad news. Now, one of the other things I did, which is probably even more outstanding than watching young women and newborn babies with drug addicts, is an overdose baby, 9 months old, Cleveland Clinic, 1962. I spent 2.5 hours giving that child CPR. I had a high-speed blood pressure, EEG, EKG on that child. I had an anesthesiologist passing gas. I had the head of pediatrics, the head of artificial organs, the head of the kidney dialysis unit, the head nurse, and the head technician. And the question comes up, and it starts with the head of pediatrics. I think it's time to end this. The child will have to pronounce dead. It then went to Willem Falk, the head of artificial organs. He said yes. Went to Sat Nakamoto, the head of Cleveland Clinic's dialysis program. He said yes, enough is enough. The nurse said yes. The tech said yes. The anesthesiologist said yes. And it came up to my turn. I could have said no and kept trying on that child. I know what people look like with drugs, and we're supplying that stuff. And when every time I ask, how much money have we gotten, the city gives me a runaround and keeps on doing it. And I'm into money. I mean, you guys are making a lot of money in the city with your legal fees. About, hey, let's have an audit of tourism. That's been asked to me as a councilman, and I relayed that request from the city. And I've gotten some really great runarounds, but I have never gotten an okay for an audit. And one of the things that happens in the city is we have our facilities guys come over here and help put up trees or take stickers off or do stuff. And they're not reimbursed for it. It's only a small amount. And when I was having to contract people, if I had to bring an outside person and they charged me from the time they left their door to the time they got here, they did the job and went away. So if the city was to be compensated for people to come over here and remove stickers, the time clock starts when they leave the building over on Deer Valley Road, Deer Island Road, and come here. The hours, and I would be charged not their salary, but what it costs them. So that means their salary, their benefits, and a little bit of profit. Basically, I would be paying 3 times the amount of their salary. The city does not get that money from tourism. That's what goes out. And when we asked about that, it pushed off. I can imagine I'm bothering people by wanting that done. So when you talk about 15 people or whatever, easily. You talk about people that should be working there easily. It's not a crime, people, to say that people are not doing their job. It may be upsetting, but you feel that it's terrible to do that, and Mr. Topaz doing his job should be removed from his position. I've been told, and I've studied pretty closely to it, that I don't talk until my attorney's present. We asked for a change in time, not a change in date. Actually, wanted this meeting to start earlier, and you refused to do that. You didn't even supply the first, and you have not given us a list of all the things that I'm supposed to do. And I assume until somebody puts their name on a complaint, it's just hearsay, which means nothing has been said about me other than hearsay. You can hide behind your client privilege, but until they put their name on it, written down, it's nothing. The other problem that I see is some of the inferences John Walsh has been told about this and this and what. Well, I talked to John relatively regularly for a long time. Never mentioned that. He must have a file in his desk of these complaints with the signature on it. I would like to see that file. That's all I've got to say.
You had an opportunity to see that. A
No.
couple of times. It's been
My attorney wasn't here.
as we discussed. Would your counsel like to speak?
Yeah, I would just kind of like to reiterate kind of what Mr. Topaz has been saying. This whole thing is over this investigative report.
If you guys would like yourself to review.
Yeah, sorry, my name is Attorney Aaron President for Lower Columbia Law Group.
Could you, sorry, could you spell it for us?
Oh, President, yeah, sorry. TRUKOSITZ. Yeah, this is all over this investigative report. You say that Mr. Topaz has had an opportunity to witness it. Attorneys definitely have not. We have requested it. You mentioned some issues about possible retaliation. I still think there's a way that maybe this could be redacted and we could get some sort of paper trail or some sort of see what Mr. Topaz is accused to be doing on paper and kind of get some more information on that, which we've not been provided. You know, it is a policy in Oregon government for, you know, open and trying to get an informed public. And it's just with this report that only the three council members have had, which are acting as jury and executioner on this, it just doesn't seem like that is, you know, a due process thing for Mr. Topaz. We again request for that report to be made available. If redactions need to be made for some reason, that's, you know, definitely something we can talk about, but I'd like to see that report.
And you know the history.
So, and forgive me for butchering it, Mr. Truckett, pretty good idea. So, forgive me because you may not be aware of the full background of this. Councilor Topaz in November indicated that he had a lawyer that would be available in January. We've never seen a lawyer. Councilor Topaz indicated at two of the different city council meetings that his lawyer was going to be available to participate at any point at any time. At the last city council meeting that Councilor Topaz attended, we asked him for the name of his lawyer repeatedly. Coincidentally, the name of the lawyer was also Peter, real Pete. Councilor Topaz refused to give us the last name. Your firm appeared, I think, maybe 7 days ago, somewhere in there. So the city has waited for Councilor Topaz to give his version of events, to have the opportunity to respond to allegations, and to meet with the investigator. They've waited since November. He still hasn't answered any of the allegations. He still hasn't offered any response to the actual allegations that were shared with him verbally at one meeting and again at a second meeting. He still didn't attend a meeting where the entire report was produced for all of city council.
And him and his attorney.
The day of the meeting,
And him and his
he
attorney.
indicated that he had surgery. When the meeting was scheduled, which was on March 31st, he was present. Actually, I'm sorry, March 17th, he was present. He didn't indicate he had surgery on the 31st. And he attended the meeting on April 7th, shortly thereafter. So it was a pretty good recovery from the surgery. I don't mean to disparage Mr. Topaz. Maybe he had surgery, maybe he didn't, but he certainly didn't tell the city about that. He has had ample opportunity to have the report discussed with him, both by the investigator, both by the council, and both by us. He still hasn't answered anything. The investigation is concluded. That's where we are. The city has determined that it's going to be able to take action at this point, and that's where we are now. For Councilor Topaz to say he's not aware of the allegations is completely disingenuous. This has been briefed and discussed with him repeatedly. I noticed in his discussion tonight, he still didn't address any of the allegations. So I understand what you're saying. We can potentially discuss, but it's up to council as to whether they waive attorney-client privilege or not. But the report at this point is privileged, and it's in council's decision as to whether they waive that and decide to send it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear all that. I still don't believe that Mr. Topaz has seen anything in that. It's all been verbal
He
and
skipped the meeting when he could have seen it in writing.
was not available to be sent to him or some other thing.
The council had concerns that Councilor Topaz would disseminate the report publicly. It's attorney-client privilege. So we elected to do it where it would be shown to him at a meeting that he initially said he could attend. And then he elected not to.
I mean, I think it comes back to him being in the hospital and, I understand we're really new to this case. And so we're trying to,
Oh, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean to disparage anything that you're doing. I know that you guys aren't new to this case. You don't understand the background. I'm trying to let you know what it is. I think the thing that's also interesting is the report is one thing. The other forum where Councilor Topaz could have at any time participated was in the investigation and the process of the investigation, which took 4 months because Councilor Topaz wouldn't participate until he wanted to give him the opportunity to do so. He declined to do so.
I mean, yeah, I don't believe he has any duty to do that though.
No, he doesn't. But for him to now complain about how the investigation went, when he elected not to participate, is again disingenuous with that.
Well, I don't think he's complaining about how it went. I just think he's complaining about not ever being able to see it.
Which again, he's been afforded ample opportunity to see it. So we're going to probably disagree on that point until cows come home. Okay. But I think the record's pretty clear that he had at least 3 different opportunities where the allegations were clearly discussed with him and where he had a chance to review the entire report. And the other counselors all reviewed it, all asked questions, and it was discussed.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we stand with our part that we, haven't seen it, we reached out several times since we've taken over and we have not seen it before.
So let me clarify one thing about you reaching out several times. I invited your co-counsel to contact me at least 2 separate times by telephone, and I said I would be happy to share the allegations and discuss it. He declined. I've never received a phone call from your office. When I did call your office, your co-counsel was unavailable.
I mean, he tried to be available tonight. He asked for
Didn't hear anything about movement of time until shortly before the meeting. The first thing we got was a date, and your co-counsel didn't indicate he had a problem with the date when he first contacted my office.
Okay, any other?
I mean, we just want to, this is the previous attorney before Arthur took over. He was also in the hospital.
Who was it?
Phil Griffin.
Phil Griffin. Does Mr. Griffin have any other attorney in his office?
So it was the firm was Art Griffin. Nick was an associate there, essentially a partner.
Okay.
I think Phil was working on his own. Again, I'm not 100% sure on this.
Gotcha. No, yeah, I understand. I think you'd agree that there are a number of other attorneys in the Portland metro area to produce technology, and potentially Mr. Griffin had other attorneys in his office.
Maybe so. I'm not 100% sure.
So now, we're going to give citizens a chance to, an opportunity to provide comment and ordinance with council rules and procedures. So that means each speaker will have 5 minutes. Please keep it limited to 5 minutes. And they will be coming in via Zoom. So if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand and we'll click on your name and your video and make your video available. And you can have the public comment. Please keep it limited to 5 minutes. We can't see no.
I do not have anybody. I see one person raising their hand. It looks like, I believe this is Al Peterson. Hey, Al, I see you have raised your hand. I'm trying to get you to unmute and start your video.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Al, we can.
Oh, okay, good. This is kind of an interesting case, but I have a number of questions. Under what authority are all of these charges being made? We have a secret investigation, which has not evidently been shared. And it has only been presented orally to the accused. The city, sounds like the city has refused to give the written report to the accused or his attorney, and they're claiming client privileges in their refusal to give the report. Well, what about disclosure laws? In any normal case, and client and attorneys working together, there's something called disclosure. And when a client and an attorney ask for disclosure from the other attorneys, more or less it's ethical for the other attorneys to disclose what it is they're talking about, what evidence they have, what they're accusing this person of, and who the witnesses are. There has been no mention in this, other than Mr. Topaz, where these accusations are coming from, other than, I guess, city staff. So nobody knows except, I guess, the city attorney and the investigator where these supposed accusations are coming from. So it sounds like, the guys up there at the water tank don't like the fact that some city councilor shows up and is looking around. Or it sounds like that, at some storm drain on the corner of 4th Street, city workers don't like the fact that the city councilor shows up and is nosing around. So, it sounds like my city councilor, in this case, one of my city councilors, is actually doing his job. He's out looking around, checking on city projects, checking on things that the city's doing, and basically doing what he was elected to do. So then my other question is this, where in all of the city ordinances, I assume this proceeding is being done under some city ordinance. So somebody said something about harassment or something like that. I can't read anything because it's all secret. Somebody said something about harassment. I did a quick search while I was sitting here in the city code, and the only location in the city code where it mentions harassment is the harassment of wildlife. So I guess Mr. Topaz was using his BB gun to shoot at the deer in front of his house. I don't know, because guess what? It's secret. So here we have a whole bunch of secret allegations coming from unknown people, presented in what, I don't know, appears to be some kind of judicial proceeding. And according to the public notice, because I don't know what else is assumed, according to the public notice, it's some kind of disciplinary action or dismissal. Well, did anybody happen to read the city charter? The city charter only has 2 particular items where a city councilor can, quote, be dismissed. One is if he's declared by a judge to be incompetent, or 2, if he gets convicted of a crime and goes to jail. So where has that occurred? So where is the authority that the city council can either dismiss Mr. Topaz or discipline Mr. Topaz? And the last thing I think that I want to say, now I forgot what it was. So to me, this entire proceeding is completely out of order. It has no basis under any city ordinance. The investigation guy who just presented didn't even present under what law supposedly these allegations are being brought on Mr. Topaz. So what laws are we talking about here? There's no harassment law in the city of St. Helens. So, bring the allegations. What are the allegations? Cite the law that you're citing these allegations on. And
5 minutes. Can you wrap it up, please? Your 5 minutes.
Well, that's pretty much it. Cite the law that you're actually supposedly making these allegations, and what law that he supposedly broke. Sounds to me like, he was doing his job.
Thank you, Al. Joe, can you answer?
So this
Were those all the comments that?
Oh, yeah. Matt, is all the comments?
We have one person coming on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Brady Prian.
Brady, your talk to 5 minutes, please.
Sure. So my first comment would be, I don't often agree with Al on anything. This would be one of those situations, except for one point that he made. I would like to know the authority that the city does have to dismiss someone. Not that I'm in disagreement with it. I would just like to know what that process is and how that happens, and if someone there could explain it. My second point is your audio was horrible. I could hear Al just fine, unfortunately, but I couldn't hear anybody else for almost the whole meeting. This hearing sort of reminds me of the impeachment trials of Donald Trump. In the first impeachment trial, everybody said, oh, well, he's learned his lesson and he'll be good. And from then on, he will go on and be a normal city councilor. Steve Topaz's triade today, going on about crap that happened probably more than a decade ago, tells us he has not learned his lesson. And while I have certainly disagreements with many city councilors on many different issues, so far, I do not believe that any of the city councilors, regardless of whether I agree with you or don't agree with you, is not working for the best interest of the city. You can work for the best interest of the city, and I can disagree with you, but I do believe that is, you might be wrong, but I do believe that is at the root of what you're doing. Mr. Topaz, however, is the exception to that on your city council. His entire being, which he has publicly stated in the council meeting, is to get even with the city. And he has said that, and he said it publicly, and he stated it on the record. And his entire being is to try and screw things up and to make things difficult. And that is why he is there, to see how much money he can cost the city, to see how many wrenches he can throw in anything that happens to the city. And I think that's not unacceptable for a city councilor. He may disagree with you, as I often do, but when he chooses to run for office, he has a responsibility to work for the good of the city, not for his personal reasons and not to obstruct the city, even if he disagrees with them. Once the council has made a decision, it is his job as a city councilor to support and go with the city council and support the city council instead of being an obstructionist. The entire hearing, the fact that it took since November and how many delays, shows you that his whole objective is just delay, 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 including a letter that he sent after the initial investigation started that lists 15 or 12 some different conditions that goes back about the mill property sale, and that you didn't properly, you wanted some documentation of the sale of the property. It's like, this was handled by attorneys. This was done legally. It was registered, and he wants special documentation, complaining about how Matt Brown shouldn't be city administrator, which is the decision the entire council made. You don't get to go back as a city council then and complain about that, and then decides that he wants to make Rachel Berry city administrator. I mean, it had a litany of ridiculous things, which tells me he has not learned his lesson. In fact, quite the contrary, he is going to continue to just try and screw the citizens of St. Helens, frankly, and see how much he is not, contrary to what Al Peterson said, he is not there to try and do his job. He is there to try and make things as difficult as possible. And I think the multitude of complaints that are in front of you, that you have said and read, that, and I do think that those should be made public with proper redactions to protect the identity of the people. But those complaints against him are case in point. And should you not do anything tonight to him, then you're just going to embolden him as Donald Trump was emboldened. And I don't think that that's a direction that we can go.
Okay, thank you, Brady. Matt, do you see any other public comment?
I do not see any other public comments. Counselors, is a staff member allowed to speak?
I would say yes.
I would like to read a prepared statement. I will keep it to less than 5 minutes. Greetings, council members. I come to you as someone in a leadership role within this city. I have come to you in the role as a governing body, not once, and now not twice, but 3 times, in an effort to speak honestly and candidly about what has been happening in this workplace and what I have personally dealt with in my interactions with Stephen Topaz in violations of our code of ethics, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity, and conduct expectations. My first complaint came on July 5th, 2019, almost 2 years ago. It outlined 3 very clear situations of slandering employees, admitted harassment, and public humiliation of your employees. I also outlined 4 specific areas in the St. Helens Code of Ethics that I believe Stephen Topaz has violated and has proven himself to be a hindrance to the employees on a daily basis with his interactions, as well as being incoherent during public meetings with statements of half-truths and misguided mathematics. His behavior is disruptive to the future of this community and impacts the staff's ability to fulfill the city's mission and vision. He has fully admitted to getting elected to causing trouble for this city, and admittedly, he has now succeeded. In my first official complaint, I asked for one thing at the end, one thing only. I asked for a public apology to be read during a public meeting so that all staff could hear it directly from him, and a written apology that could be given to the employees specifically impacted regarding the improper treatment and creation of a hostile work environment. An apology that shows an understanding of what was done, why it was wrong, and what will be done in the future to avoid these issues. As a governing board, you failed to take any action. 2 counselors that sit in there now and 2 previous counselors that sat there let his actions continue without any recourse. Now 2 new counselors have started and have begun to see Stephen in action. I assume that counselors have read the final report that even I have not even seen, and I am one of the complaints against him. Until tonight, all of you have remained silent. Your silence is acceptance of his behavior. In August 2020, I wrote a follow-up complaint noting that nothing has been done and the city council has remained silent in acceptance of the continued behavior. I informed city council in writing of the disparaging remarks that I have witnessed related to a certain city employee. Again, no action was taken by city council. In late 2019, I had had enough and attempted to seek an employment in another city. During that hiring process, newspaper articles from Stephen Topaz's editorials in the Spotlight newspaper were cited that included accusations disparaging my professional career as a finance director. I say to you on this day that I feel my future and my professional career has already been tarnished by his false accusations and disparaging comments. For someone like me who's only 38, I have a long time to go before I can retire. And I do not know if I will ever get the next opportunity because of Stephen Topaz and the damage that he has already caused. During the hiring process of our new public works director, I overheard several times Stephen Topaz make inappropriate comments regarding people that we were interviewing. This included race, education, and even sex in relation to a male or female public works director. These are crystal clear violations of the Equal Employment Act. The day of final interviews, I withdrew my name from the nominating committee based on the opinions from our attorneys to personally protect myself from any potential legal action that could be taken by those that were interviewed that day. As a city council, you failed again to act, allowing him to continue to be involved in the hiring process, knowing full well of his bias against one of the applicants. Just a few meetings ago, during a work session, Stephen Topaz essentially called me a drug dealer and a thief. You all sat there in silence as a council. It was me who had to ask the attorney to say something and request an apology from him. Then at the evening meeting, I received an email apology that was nothing short of mansplaining it of what he intended to say. At that evening meeting, my apology was met with more mansplaining of what he intended to say. A real apology does not include this. All he had to say was, "I'm sorry for calling you those things, and it will not happen again." But he chose not to do that. He chose to try and codify his position again with knowledge of half-truths and hearsay on situations that have never happened at the city of St. Helens and have never happened in my career. The weeks following his statements, I was the butt of many jokes around City Hall. I have the right to work at a place where I am not disparaged and I am not humiliated by one of my leaders, a city councilor, and that right has been violated. I have heard Stephen Topaz refer to people in this community as Chinamen, cripples, and these are words that should never be heard by our community. They are clear violations of our code of ethics, clear violations of a U.S. equal employment opportunity, and clear violations of our conduct expectations. And I stress again, not even an apology has been offered to our community for all those that have been offended. For a third time now, I urge the City Council to act and show resolve, and that you value the dedicated employees and volunteers of this city and your community as a whole, so that we can finally have a resolution to this matter and move forward. I know it is difficult with our current governing policy and our charter because there is no easy or clear path for you to take. I know this is not something any of you signed up for. It's definitely not something that I signed up for. But when will enough be enough for you to act? How far are you willing to accept this behavior? You hold the keys as elected officials. You lead this community. Make the decision so that we can start to heal and find peace. I cannot guarantee much in life, but one thing that I can guarantee is that the cost of doing nothing will be far greater than the cost of a decision to dismiss Stephen Topaz as city councilor. Thank you.
Okay. So now I'm going to turn over to our legal counsel to answer a few questions that were raised by Mr. Freehan and Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to do the best I can. So for council, my name is Bill Monahan with City Attorney's Office. So Mr. Peterson raised a number of issues. And by the way, we did receive this earlier email yesterday where he made a number of issues known. He's asked what authority the council has to dismiss a member of council. And in fact, there is not authority under our charter or our laws to dismiss a council member. The reason that we've used that citation is that through this process, the council has had an opportunity to utilize its investigation and protect it as an exempt record. So we use ORS 192-616, section 2. I'm not sure exactly what the letter is on that, but we use that. And in the most recent discussion, we had conversation that if the council wanted to move forward and for the first time have conversation about what might be the options to take any disciplinary action, the citation on that is ORS 192-660, section 2D, which says specifically that to consider the dismissal or disciplining of or hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, etc. So we've used that language to parrot what the ORS was that we were considering utilizing until Councilor Topaz asked us here. We wanted to make sure we kept uniformity of the process. So we've used the word dismissal, but the charter does not give authority to the city council to remove a member of city council. There are some charters that I've seen in the state of Oregon, home rule state, that there are some specific references to a process that can be used to remove a council member. City of St. Helens does not have that. So we need to move specifically to other opportunities for discipline. And later on in this meeting, I'll be happy to go over with you some of the potential methods if you're interested in hearing further. The second issue Mr. Peterson raised, and maybe I won't get them all, but I'll try to get to as many as I can. He mentioned that we only have orally raised the issues to Councilor Topaz, and you've already heard a discussion about that. There was one opportunity, unfortunately, we was not able to attend that meeting. We did not receive any notice in advance of that. I believe my recollection is that the mayor received an email from Councilor Topaz the evening before the night of the hearing. And if I remember what the mayor read to us was that I will be at the meeting. I got out of the hospital every day. So there could have been a contact by Council Topaz or someone else earlier, and perhaps the council could have considered moving the meeting. But as you know, setting a council meeting, coordinating the schedules of all those involved is quite a difficult task sometimes. But there was the opportunity for Council Topaz to set forward QC report. The city has refused to give the report. Well, in fact, again, we'll cover that. There was mention of, in any normal case, there's disclosure of attorneys. Well, that's in a criminal setting. This is not a criminal setting. This is an administrative setting. So there aren't the rules of conduct for a criminal setting. This doesn't apply. There was comment about the right to participate for Council Topaz. His lawyer raised objections, and as Peter pointed out, we did make the opportunity available for contact by your associate to contact Pete and have conversation. That's been overlooked. I believe it was on around the 14th that, or maybe the 13th, that we first learned that there was a lawyer involved for Council Topaz. Now we've heard tonight that that lawyer is from the same firm that Council Topaz has had in the past. So there's obviously been many opportunities for a lawyer to contact us or to be involved to represent Council Topaz. Where in the city ordinances is there a basis for the various complaints? Well, what you've heard is one of the complaints is about discrimination. And the city has a personnel policy. It doesn't, all the city's rules and regulations don't have to be in a city code or a municipal ordinance or a charter. The city has the right to regulate the workplace and to protect the employees by having an appropriate workplace. And as a result, there are policies and procedures that apply not only to the employees and their conduct, but approximately 2 years ago, the state of Oregon decided that it was necessary to ask and require all cities to put in their policies an anti-harassment policy that applies to both elected officials and volunteers. So there is a specific policy that applies to discrimination, as is there a policy about bullying, as is there a policy about the use of having an appropriate workplace where people are not discriminated against because of any race, religion, etc. So the authority for these complaints is within various policies and rules the city has in place. Disciplinary actions, well, as I mentioned, I'll be happy to go over what some of those disciplinary actions might be.
My question would be this, you asked about the criminal, you said about the criminal aspect of that. With the, I don't know if it's criminal, but I know it's ethics for sure. The 2019 budget meeting hearing, April 20th, where I personally actually called him out on his behavior in that meeting. If you watch that video, that was, in my eyes, was unethical. It was trying to move a project towards a property that the lawsuit was filed in 2009. This is 10 years later, and he had been a counselor first year on the budget, and he's immediately attacking what appears to me was coming in under the RAND for that specific agenda, what I assume, because that's what I heard immediately in the budget, which budget runs a lot of different cities. So that's very concerning to me that he has had that deep of maybe some issues with the city. And I know there's plenty of former meetings that the councilor said they were familiar with Council Topaz, that over this stormwater project on his house that he lost on a lawsuit and was really trying to direct a stormwater drainage facility, talking about the park over here. And you can go back and watch it on video. It is absolutely on video. It's April 20th, 2019. And I feel it's very unethical. I think that is criminal. So under that basis, that's why I'm asking, is it criminal?
So, Mr. Mayor, no, in fact, it's not criminal.
Okay.
However, there is a statute that applies, and that's ORS Chapter 244, which is the says that a public official is not able to use their position for personal gain. So that is certainly something that if there are facts that substantiate a penalty, that is something that the Oregon Ethics Commission can look at, and the Ethics Commission can look at issues that go back as far as 4 years. So they would not be able to go back to 2009, as I heard you say, but if there was some action that was taken 10 years later, 2019, that would be within the 4 years. So that would be the authority there. And I don't want to go into details about the report other than to say the investigation was to evaluate the issues. The city council does not have the ability to enforce on ORS 244.
Exactly.
So I hope I answered your question.
No, you did, absolutely.
And then where is the authority to discipline? Well, that comes through the city's authority to apply its rules and regulations and its policies, and to make a determination of whether someone's actions rise to whether someone's conduct rather is appropriate for the position. And as we've heard, there were comments made. The last speaker, I'm sorry, the second speaker made some very compelling comments about the responsibilities of a member of the city council. The member of the city council swears that they will enforce the Constitution, et cetera, including local ordinances, local regulations. And you have policies. You have a policy on operating rules and procedures. You have another policy on governing policy. These are resolutions number 1837 and 1838. Both of those are appropriate to refer to, or if there have been violations, what can this council do? Well, it's not clear exactly what action leads to a penalty. That's something for the city council. It's in a peer relationship to make a determination of whether one of its members should receive some sort of discipline. And that can be something like public censure, it can be a letter from the council, it can be a resolution, it can be a restriction of some of the abilities of that city council member to have access, say, to employees who have raised complaints or who have felt that they have been either bullied, discriminated against. It affects their ability to work, creates stress on them. You have a responsibility as a city council, I know you know this, to protect all of your employees and have the efficient operations of the city. Now, what I've heard Councilor Topaz say, and I'm not doing anything but trying to answer questions. Councilor Topaz has said that he has been out there doing various things to, using his knowledge and his expertise to check on certain things to make sure they're done right. Well, you're professionals to do that. We have that as their responsibility. A member of the city council is one individual in a group of 5. As you all know, you operate as a group of 5 unless the council delegates, or the charter or the council delegates to an individual a certain level of authority. Now, you have within your governing policy a statement that says that members of the council will be assigned one or more city departments to be affiliated. And you've gone through a process to review what level of authority there would be for a member of city council. And as I understand it, the council works as a collaborative decision-making process, but the majority responsibility rests with the city administrator. It's his responsibility to do the day-to-day operation. And again, a council member doesn't have the right to step in and either oversee the work of an employee or to challenge the work of a contractor or an employee. So these are basic rules of efficient operation of government that you have lived by, and there's an expectation that any city council member needs to live by this. So there is reference that this whole proceeding is out of order. Well, we've got a great length to have a process that was fair, that was objective, and to give the complainants as well as the person who the complaint was filed against a opportunity to get their input in so it can be properly reviewed by an investigator. You know that process has taken place as a record of that. I think I've covered everything that was stated by Mr. Peterson. The second speaker asked what authority does the city have to dismiss not covered, that the city does not have that authority. Now, the third speaker, Matt Brown, has raised a number of issues. You've heard some of those issues before, and he's called on your responsibility as council who is aware of issues that have been raised by your employees and by others against Council Topaz. He's saying you have a responsibility to act. And we totally agree with that. And I know from my involvement with you that you have been following our guidance as we're cautiously going through this process to protect the employees, to make sure that there is some action. I've heard council members raise at the executive sessions. We need to get something out there. We need to speak with our employees. We need to take action. But you as a council have been more than generous in providing Council Topaz an opportunity to have his day and to have his opportunity to speak. So that has happened tonight. I think you're now at a place that should you wish to take some action, we can talk about what those various forms of discipline might be. And I will say they're somewhat limited. We can also talk, if you wish, about, well, going forward, if your concern is that perhaps Council Topaz might not get the full message and become compliant with process, you might be able to make some changes. We can give you some suggestions on some potential process. In fact, you considered one of those in 2010 when the charter was put before the voters to make a modification that would have created an avenue for the city council to actually have the right to dismiss a council member for a specific act. And I'm not saying in any way the Council Topaz has violated that. That's not been the investigation. But I would say that you would have the right in the future to put before the voters, and they're the only ones who can approve a charter amendment. The voters could decide to make a change and to create a process going forward for the potential. So I'll turn it over to Peter because I think he wanted to comment on one of the comments that Mr. Brown raised.
So the council is in a somewhat unique position, and the points raised by Mr. Brown are well taken.
Yeah.
The council is in an odd situation in that Council Topaz is not an employee, it's an elected official. So the council is really dealing with two separate issues. You're dealing with Council Topaz and his conduct, but the council, city is also an employer. So the city has an obligation to investigate the complaints and concerns that were raised by Mr. Brown and others. You got a question about the authority for the investigation and other half. It's twofold. The first was the council approving the investigation on September 16th that included a number of concerns that were raised, including Councilor Topaz potential acting for his own benefit. Then the city also had an obligation as an employer to conduct an investigation into the employment-related issues raised by Mr. Brown and others. Those were and Phil articulated it well when he said that the policies and the procedures required you to go through that investigation as an employer. And the Oregon Workplace Fairness Act, which Bill was referring to, sets out that complaint procedure and sets out that investigation procedure. That's what the city has done, and that's what the investigation is. Councilor Topaz is correct. His attorney is correct. He is not required to participate in an investigation. He simply is he's an elected official, and your ability to discipline him is in the context of an elected official. But as an employer, the city also has an obligation to make sure that they protect its employees from vendors, third parties, contractors, or other people like that that create a hostile work environment or participate in discriminatory behavior. That's the second part of what the city has to decide what it's going to do, is how it does that with respect to Councilor Topaz. Because those allegations related to Councilor Topaz's conduct were substantiated. Councilor Topaz raised a number of issues, suggested that what went on was politically motivated perhaps, or was motivated because he called out these issues. I think the council can't ignore the fact that even if that was the case, so even assuming for the benefit of the doubt, people made complaints because they were unhappy with Councilor Topaz, Those complaints are all substantiated by an independent investigator that has no affiliation with the city, and substantiated many of those complaints based upon her review of public records and council meetings. And the conduct that we're talking about is not conduct that is necessarily related to Councilor Topaz raising questions about people's performance. It's about behavior that the council has already indicated is inappropriate and unacceptable under its charter, under its policies, and under its procedures. That's really what we're talking about. And I want to make sure that you talk about the fact that with respect to Mr. Brown, even if Councilor Topaz is willing to apologize, that doesn't mean council can't apologize.
Well, I know I will apologize to Mr. Brown and all the city staff that have been affected by the situations that have transpired between them and Councilor Topaz. I know that I'm truly sorry that has happened. It is very truly coming back to powerful as far as how do we deal with this. He's an elected official. Al Peterson said he's my counselor. He's right. He's Al Peterson's counselor. He represents Al and many others. How do we go about? But yet we have a workforce, a work environment that could be hostile. If you've ever worked for a hostile boss, even if he's not hostile all the time, it's the times that he is. And finally, what do you say? I'm done. I'm out of here. That's old school. Nowadays, you can get sued. The city is open up for liability. Can be sued. And it has been stated a number of times that there is no care in the world about the city getting sued from Mr. Topaz. This so his and my citizens know that voted for me, that he does not care if the city spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney or gets sued because of his actions. And he has stated that publicly to this entire council, the old council especially, a number of times. Publicly, Brady Freehan is right. That is absolutely true. And I do find that your conduct, and again, in that April 20th, 2019 Budget Committee meeting hearing is very unethical. When you're trying to direct a stormwater project to your property, when you've already lost a lawsuit in 2009, and half of his information in his testimony earlier was erroneous. And I would like to make council rules in the future that unless you are speaking on your own behalf, you need to make clear that when you're talking numbers or figures or anything about city business, that this is my own belief, unless you have a handwritten document that proves otherwise. Because it's just erroneous facts, and that's what's been going on. Bombshell, boom. And the staff have put up this whole time. You can watch it on video. It's staying. And September 16th, when we ordered this investigation, the investigator I know reached out a number of times to Mr. Topaz to try to interview him. How many times is she documented it all?
8 different times.
8 different times. We have heard there was an attorney for months, and he has continued to evade every meeting that we have. These are important. These are, if I had 5 allegations like that against me, I can tell you what, that's serious business. It is. I just think, I'm speaking because I am an elected official. I'm speaking from my own words right now. If I had those allegations come against me, I would definitely, if they were not true, would have hired an attorney a long time ago and been very methodical and would have addressed the attorneys back and forth. And then I would have, if they were erroneous, I would have asked for my attorney's fees to be paid because they were erroneous, if I was really on the right side. That's just me personally. And I did speak that from my own opinion. Earlier was factual though, the previous statement. So, I would love to, further discuss what some disciplinary actions could look like. I would love to give them direction.
You want a little talk from the council, and any opinions from
Yeah,
any of us?
we absolutely can talk, yes, yes.
Well, I was interested in what Mr. Topaz had to say. And he didn't say a thing about the 5 allegations. And that's why I'm here. We had a huge process in obtaining and interviewing all the staff members that had problems with Mr. Topaz. So what I heard was just nothing about the allegations. I just heard kind of his life story about what's gone on in St. Helens and other places. So these 5 allegations are pretty darn important, I believe. And my question to our legal counsel is, does this set the framework for civil lawsuits against Mr. Topaz? Or is he protected in any way because he is a elected official? Because these are serious. Reading through these are very serious allegations. And so my question is there enough for the staff, if I was a staff member and felt harassed and bullied, abused, if I was Mr. Topaz, I would worry about a civil suit. And I don't know if this sets the framework for that or not. Just that investigation, just that process, that procedure, that's the way it is now. Now the council is not going there. We can't do that. We can't. We have other disciplinary avenues possibly that we can follow. But I'm concerned about the people who got interviewed. I'm concerned about each one of those individuals who came forward and said and testified about what had happened to them. And so I just don't think that it's going to stop here no matter what.
So I can just go away in on the actual individual liability of the council. You can do that. I think the question for a number of the employees is obviously things that they have to weigh on their own after on consultation with lawyers. We don't represent any of the individual employees. It's inappropriate for us to advise them what they can do. The investigation is something that the city as an employer part is obligated to do that. So whether it's a framework for additional legal action is not really the question. The reason the investigation is done, the city employers determine what kind of things it needs to do to remedy that situation as an employer. The other piece of the investigation, like we talked about, was whether there was misuse by Councilor Topaz of his office or for personal benefit. That's something the council gets to do. Again, 2 separate issues. But with respect to your question about would the individual employees have personal claims against Councilor Topaz directly, that's really up to them. There have obviously been comments that Councilor Topaz has made that where he or their qualifications, where he suggested, one instance in the public meeting, they made it one person potentially being drugs. Mr. Brown's comments were concerning. And as an attorney, those possibly could give rise to liability, potential personal liability. But that's not something that we're here to talk an opinion on. And we have to actually be very careful about doing that because there is no relationship we have with those folks as our clients. With respect to Councilor Topaz's individual liability, as a counselor, I can let Bill deal with that. But just because he's a counselor doesn't automatically shield him from lawsuits.
My comments, Councilor Wood, the council, I agree with Pete's analysis. The statement I made earlier, a member of city council is able to act as a member of the body. And when the council member acts as a member of the body, carries out the responsibilities that he or she has, including those that might be delegated by the council. In none of these cases have we heard that there's any delegation that's been made. When a council member is operating as a member of council, carrying out the work of the city, the laws of the city, there is covered by your insurance coverage, CIS. However, CIS will not provide coverage when an individual steps out of that responsibility and starts to take part in something that could be an unlawful act and an act that is not within the realm of their responsibility. So there could be exposure. I'm not saying there is exposure. I'm saying there could be exposure. And the city does not have a responsibility to defend someone's actions when they step out of their role. Let me leave it at that if I could adequately answer your question.
I think it does. My concern is specifically for our staff. And you heard Mr. Brown's testimony about he came to the council not only once, but twice, but 3 times, and we did nothing. And so, you know, this process that we are going through now, hopefully should yield some positive effects or positive opportunities for our staff if they want to go further individually. And that's my concern, because if I was a staff member and that happened to me, I know where I would be. And I know that possibly the framework of what we're doing now could help in that, could aid in that fight.
That's a good point. I'm going to reiterate and kind of add to just a little bit of that. Okay, so like let's say for example in this body, like we heard some testimony here earlier that I know is erroneous, and I know for a fact Doug and I oversee public works as well as administration. The water tank where Mr. Topaz was out doing his investigation, he showed up unannounced, no hard hat, no safety jacket, and was actually looking inside of a water tank, unannounced. Nobody knew he was there. It's very, OSHA would have a fit, and Topaz should know that. You can't be looking into a deep water tank. And it sounds like, no, you can't even be around that project. That's why you were told not to go out there. And it is not true, again, that we dump millions of gallons into the creek all at once. That is just not true. I can guarantee it. I can guarantee it. You said you turned us into the EPA. You didn't let any of this council know that about millions of gallons being turned into a creek illegally. We knew that. We needed to empty it because the contractor failed again. And we are all familiar with that, Councilor Topaz, including you. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that statement, what was just made here, knowing the facts behind it? Because he speaks and these reporters grab it and they may take it and run with it. And it's erroneous.
So one way to address that, Mr. Mayor, is to have all the council members identify the things that have come out through this investigation and hearing that you want to set straight with the public. And one of the things that you could do is you could provide some sort of censure and identify, because of these things that have been looked at and the investigator has substantiated and you have heard the report and you've made your own findings, you wish that the public be aware of these things, that would be your opportunity to set the record straight. You could include comments about statements that were made in this hearing.
I want to add one thing that I think is important, and it's extremely important, given what Councilor Morton brought up, and I think it's a fair point. Councilor Morton, you were concerned about potential retaliation people would suffer, including witnesses that participated in the investigation or the complaints. The activity that those individuals engage in is protected activity. The lawyer needs to take steps to make sure that they do not suffer from retaliation or retaliatory conduct because they participated in the investigation or because they brought it up. Those again are protected. And I think that that's important. I think the other thing that I wanted to add to Bill's comments, Mr. Mayor, this kind of tracks very much with what you're saying. If the council, we're not making that determination, but if the council disagrees with statements that the Topaz is making or doesn't agree with the conduct that's been alleged and laid out, I think the council needs to make sure it disavows that conduct from Council Topaz. The council members believe it's inappropriate, unacceptable. It's important that the council go ahead and do it. Bill makes a good point in that to the extent that there are things that are inaccurate or that the council desires to comment on some of the allegations or some of the things that were stated, that the council has the right to do that, and the ability to do that and clarify. But they need to do it in the proper forum, in the proper manner, which is a censure resolution.
I had a couple of things. So first of all, I think that we owe Councilor Topaz and his attorney the right to see the investigation. Whether or not we take the names out, that's fine. They need to see it, so that's not going on that. And then second of all, I just want to say this to Councilor Topaz. We represent the people. We need to be professional in all aspects, including asking questions and looking into things. And that also means being politically correct. And that's something that we just have to do. So I hope you see that, and I hope you take that with you in all aspects of life, not just here, but everywhere we are. So those are my thoughts.
I agree with Councilor Chilton that to some respect that there's some way to provide information to Councilor Topaz's attorney about the report to do that. But I am prepared to move ahead with action prior to that, happening. So from what I've heard tonight, I do regret that coming into this process months after it began, I'm thinking in some ways, perhaps Councilor Chilton and I'm not trying to impinge the integrity of Mayor Scholl or Councilor Morton, that we have not been as personally involved in this. I do think that they are both doing their utmost to look at this fairly and objectively. But perhaps I think the fact that Councilor Chilton and I have attended some of the meetings where some of these things happen, but I was kind of, and not as involved a participant, and think maybe bringing a different type of perspective and objectivity. But from what I have, what was presented to me in the report, and believing that we have provided adequate opportunity for timely response. I am ready to move forward in terms of hearing the suggestion, the recommendations laid out for a possible action of discipline, whether that be the public censure, the letter, etc. I am ready to move forward on that, whether or not Councilor Topaz sees or does not see the actual report. I do want to express my deep concern for the fact that going on a period of a couple of years where we have had city employees, I think above and beyond the call of patience or even civility to wait for the council to take action has been admirable, and but I don't think we can allow any more time to pass. And I think even before a statement of, and maybe we will do these things at the same time, choosing some type of dismissal, but also making a clear message to our staff employees. And I'm hearing that from everyone that our employees need to know that that we will protect them going forward, and we need to make a clear statement, whether that is an apology to the employees or a clear statement. But I think that has to include, again, this is uncomfortable given that Councilor Topaz was elected by the citizens. I guess I'm frankly relieved that our charter does not give us the choice of dismissal, because that is something, but that is something that perhaps the voters will do take into account at the next election, should Councilor Topaz seek re-election. So for me, coming in here, I always understood that dismissal was not one of the options, but we do need to make some kind of other statement, whether again that's the censure, the letter, whatever. And I would like very much to hear our council lay out various scenarios.
So I personally have taken this kind of personally, because when this happens is mainly in this building. He comes in and it's rumble bumble every day. It was every day. It was every day he was coming in here, distracting the administration, which is what I oversee, and I witnessed it a number of times. I would like to see some type of censorship where if he needs some information, that he'll get it, but he's not just gonna come in every day with some off the wall stuff that, and that was literally happening. I'm telling you, time and time again. And he has costed the city a number of dollars just in distraction. And that is evidently, and it is absolutely true. You can ask any person that works in this entire building if you aren't here at least 3 times a week. Okay? For a while, it was every single day. And I was patient, and I allowed you to try to get informed, but it was like you're not even going for information to serve citizens. You're going for information for self-serving purposes. Because I would ask, what's he doing here?
The mayor, I
This
think
is my department and Doug's administration.
Mayor, your comment actually reminded me of something I did want to say, is that concerning the fact that Councilor Topaz being elected by the citizens, and if he's, as he continues his job, needs to be able to do his job, but with definite restrictions and limitations which are imposed. for the protection of our staff.
I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying he did not have information. There's a bunch of different ways we get it. Through email, we can put it, I would put in the box. And if it's not sufficient, we can ask again. I am in no way, shape, or form. And maybe if you want to appoint, maybe if a council wants to appoint a liaison, I don't want to get, I'm very busy, to Councilor Topaz, if he doesn't feel he's getting the information, a liaison of this council. And I'm not trying to appoint, give you guys, if you don't want it, but it's an idea. It's an idea. If he feels like he's not getting his stuff through email, and the liaison, whoever that is, Councilor Murphy, Councilor important. I don't have time to, but that may be an option too.
Well,
Go ahead.
again, I'm concerned about the staff.
Yes.
I'm not so concerned as much about the council because as Mr. Topaz comes to council, he's really done nothing. There's nothing that he's championed. There's nothing that he has positively pushed forward. It's all been negative, negative, negative. And we just put up with that. It just doesn't seem to bother us because we're moving forward. But if he had some clout, I could understand where we would be, or I would be heavily concerned about the council. I'm concerned about the staff and the staff being bullied and accosted. That is not right. So if there's anything that we can do to protect our staff, that's what I'm after. And support our staff. So I don't know if you have any guidance for us or not. And with that recommendation, I don't know if the rest of the council feels that that's an appropriate question to ask and an advice to go ahead.
Do we hear from Supervisor's attorney, or, what do you have to say about all this? Very concerning.
Well, I'm gonna make a couple of comments about Black Review. It was brought up about me wanting my property taken care of in the budget meeting. Well, almost. My property is affected underground by the water. The request was to put a storm drain down the whole block that helped basically 20 homes. There was also money to put gutters on the sidewalk. See, over the years, the city has been adding layers of asphalt to the road. In fact, when they dug the drain line through there, they what they call potholes. They cut a 4-foot square hole to see what was there. And out in the 3rd, 4th, in St. Helens Street, the asphalt is 18 inches thick, 5 layers of stuff. Originally, the sidewalks had drainage. After a number of layers of asphalt, the water went up the road of the sidewalks into the back road. Not only in my place, but all the places on 3rd and 4th Street. So asking for a drain and gutters, they will help neighborhoods. It's going to help an awful lot of my neighborhood. It was not presented as that. It was only presented to Mr. Topaz, wanted something for him. When the city was checking on this in the court, they surveyed the groundwater coming into my.
Now you're referring to 2009.
This is 2000.
So that's what's confusing about this. We're talking, so time out, Councilor Topaz, as
I'm
Neil.
talking, can I finish, please? And I'm gonna explain.
Yes, I just want you to make sure that you're keeping to the
I am.
allegations at hand.
Don't worry about it. So when we started this, what's going wrong, the city came and surveyed the water. They sampled the water in my basement. It's coming because the storm drain is not there. And they found that there's fecal coliform in
The investigation's already been done, Council, so that
I
we're
know,
gonna release a copy to your attorney.
This is
I'm
what
trying
I'm
to get through this meeting, Councilor Topaz.
Well, if you're more worried about time than the truth, we can go right now.
Okay, all right.
Can I finish?
Yeah, I'll try
Can
to
I
see what,
finish, please?
tell me where you're going with this.
Okay,
Okay.
well, I'm trying to tell you, and that's what you don't want to listen to. And so, we have a dangerous health problem in the whole neighborhood, which will be taken care of by a party. And I presented with a small drain through there because as I put forth in 2010, I put forth when I was a councilman, that we still need a storm drain. We still need to keep the water from the street, in the streets, not coming across the neighbor's yards, not across on both third, fourth.
With
So this is
2019.
a public health water problem that's continuing. Just the fact that we had a trial and I didn't prove that the city was incompetent, the water still comes down, it still rains, it still runs across the sidewalk. It can be fixed. Now, you did the same thing as you did on Knox. Good. Now, Mr. Brown was talking about me calling him for drug addict. Well, he missed one word, which is extremely important. It's really important. The discussion that evening was, we've got a drug addict. What would happen if Mr. Brown were a drug addict? Can we fire him? And the answer is no. We can test him when he gets applied for a job, and that's it, unless he's a danger, a physical danger. So that should show up on the videotape of the thing.
Mr. Mayor, I think that we're creating further problems.
I know.
No,
The
I
only
know.
reason why I wanted to ask was because I was trying to get around to the point of what we're gonna decide here today.
Well,
More input regarding that.
well, if you need the truth, that's one thing. But half truth that we're coming up now, you can't say that I said Mr. Brown was a drug addict. But you gotta use that one word to make the whole truth. And the thing was, he was a man of great respect, and he was a drug addict, even though.
Can you quit referring to that, Mr. Can you please, enough. Counselor, would you like to speak on behalf of your client?
You know, I think it comes down for me and is, you know, it's very hard for us to respond to these allegations that, you know, I personally am learning about today. I had no opportunity to learn about until today. I know that we've discussed several times about the opportunity. He has said that he has not wanted to do that for various reasons. You guys can take those reasons for what you will, but at this point in time, you know, myself and Attorney McPherman have not had an opportunity to review that for, and we're learning about these allegations, you know, an hour ago. And so it's very difficult for us to respond to.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I interject just briefly? I think the council needs to make clear that there are no intimations or anything else from the council about Matt Brown's drug use or anything along those lines.
Yes.
That's speculation completely from Councilor Topaz. The council needs to make that clear, that that's the council's position. Secondly, I understand your position. Your client has known about these allegations for literally at least, in the benefit of the doubt, for him 6 weeks. He has chosen apparently not to share any of those with you. So I struggle to understand why you can't comment on his behalf. The council may decide that they will vote, waive privilege, and share those allegations with you, but I don't. Councilor Topaz knows what they are. He absolutely knows what they are.
He has not received anything in writing, you know.
So, well, another thing is, Councilor Topaz is also, and admitted to myself and Council President Ward, when we've had executive session stuff, has taken executive session stuff to news media that we're welcome to attend, but chose not to. And admitted to this entire council and staff that was actually taking records. And then, you know, so that, I was just like wondering how they knew so much information after a meeting one time. And he says, I did it. Learned it out, I did it. So
Are those meetings public record?
So, what, but,
That's, so it's a public
yeah.
document. There's an obligation of anyone participating in the executive session not to disclose those materials. If you do so, it's a violation of state law.
Okay.
so there's been some mistrust, and this is very sensitive information that could go to a lot of different people. Why we didn't release it in an email or give a copy of paper. We did invite Council Lopez to invite legal counsel to every hearing. It's been going on for quite some time. Not hearing, every session that if he felt he needed legal counsel, or just come and we got an investigation right here, we're gonna go through it. He knew that. He emailed me, assured me that he had just had surgery, that he would be there. It's an email documented. That was, what was that, April 7th? That our meeting?
March 31 was the date that
That's right.
we had the interest.
So it's March 31st.
So it's March 17th,
Yeah, it's hard to keep track all the dates.
April 7th.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not opposed to if an attorney, I don't know, is he legally bound if we decided we wanted to only show up to Councilor Lopez and make no copies?
No, so that's, I think there's a distinction here. So the part of the reason that the report has been withheld is because of attorney-client privilege. If the council elects to waive attorney-client privilege, show it to a third party, then the council can make that decision. But once that privilege is waived,
Then we just release it. Then we just release the whole thing. Which, you know, I mean, that's, again,
Something else to think about, which is that we are going to continue to get questions about this. Al Peterson, that was just the beginning. We're going to continue to get questions. So that was been my stance all along, is that we need to do something publicly. And here's the thing, I'm all for protecting the employees. That's absolutely number one goal. But it's also about showing what happened and why we acted. That's also important. So regardless of how we think we might be looked at by the media or by citizens, we have to put the truth out there and we have to show that we acted on it. That's my thought.
executive summary of the investigation. There isn't a full investigation, but the council could elect to release the executive summary, which is a little bit more limited.
I think I'd prefer that. I think Councilor Schultz and I understand how difficult it can be when you are making choices, when you want the public to understand why you've done in the material that you base that on. But there's sometimes when you just can't. And I know I've mentioned before my time on the school board some 20 years ago when we dismissed our high school principal. And the next day when I was approached by the press as board chair to say, well, what did she do? I could only repeat the three grounds on which we did. No detail. And I know there are, and citizens began a recall petition against me and the three other members, etc. To this day, no one, knows. It blew over. So I mean, I guess I know there's going to be people throwing sticks. There's going to be people.
Remember, this is an elected official.
I understand that.
People who are upset.
And I understand that, but I also think though too that if we do not have the okay from the employees who are named in this report or who have contributed to it, that it would completely undermine any credibility that we would have that we're truly trying to protect, to provide a safe workplace for them and to provide that protection. I think that would undermine that. It certainly would, but if the union came after to you and asked you to release that to the public, the union, which the individuals, our individuals belong to, would you feel different? If I had had the understanding that the union leadership had consulted it. But also we have individuals here who are not members of the union. I mean, we have
Not
folks who
all.
are, yeah.
I understand.
So I would think the individuals themselves.
There is another option here as well, and you could release the executive summary for redactions, so that the redactions would protect the names of some of those individuals.
Yeah.
There's going to be some concerns by some of the councils about retaliation or something like that. So you could consider releasing the redactions with a clear directive that everybody present should refrain from retaliation. That's the rule we talk about.
So could we maybe direct you to come up with something that would look like, an electric summary that we could maybe potentially see at the next meeting? Maybe you could afford, if he's representing Councilor Topaz and would like to reach out, maybe you could further a conversation. And I apologize, I'm bad with last names too, and I know it's difficult to say.
It's a tough one.
So we could allow that affordability, maybe, just
And the investigator did prepare an executive summary at our direction. That is a summary of the investigation. And that's something that we could look at with that. That's what the council would like. But again, that's got to be from the council.
what do you think? I mean, that the redacted version releases it.
Yeah.
It releases it.
Do it in a supportive fashion. So we just have
I'm hoping it is supportive, because if whoever gets a hold of it can do whatever they want with it. You know,
That's why we gotta get ahead of it.
that's why we're, and that's why we're here trying to talk.
Exactly.
I do, I guess the one thing I would add is I think it's probably a good idea to check with those that complain as to whether they're okay with the
Redacted executive session.
redacted summary.
And then that
Conversation
courtesy.
John should be having.
So you also have an elected summary, right?
Executive.
Executive summary. So that's a little different.
That's it, yes, it's a summary of the report itself. The report
Yeah.
itself is long, right?
Yes.
And this.
It was very long.
Yeah.
Yes.
The executive summary breaks it down.
Yes.
But you were also saying that the executive, we should seek or the go ahead from the affected individuals for the report, for the release of the executive summary.
The council could consider consulting with those that were involved in the investigation, whether there are any objections.
This investigation was very thorough, methodical, well, the gal who did it was well put together. I'm only sorry that you couldn't make it. March 31st, Council Topaz. You said you just got out of the hospital, but there's a lot of information there, and a lot. 15 individuals backing up each other's stories, and just so and her findings were sustained. So yeah, I guess we'll move forward with, we want to go with the executive summary, or do we want to go with redacted summary?
Executive summary would be redacted, right? No names, no private information.
And I know.
I just want to make
saying
sure
this
that
is
that's
feedback from the
the
council
same
and how
thing.
that release ends up
Okay.
occurring.
I think that's probably
So-
the best. thing. Definitely don't want any of their information in there. Yeah.
The redacted executive session.
And so, and I would like to also further discussion on other means of disciplinary restrictions to staff. How that may look. I would also like to have something drawn up for future policies as far as if this ever happens again, because really what is politically happening is people just get shamed into resigning, you know, and I don't think I think there needs to be with governing bodies more accountability, to be able to know their peers and as elected officials, be able to do their work if they need to get rid of, you know, that's just me personally, you know, recalls are just cumbersome, hard to get done, even if there is stuff there. You know, and I guess it matters on who you know, is what I know from being a politician, is who do I know at the Spotlight or the Chronicle? Who do I know who's going to push it out? Right? Happens. It most certainly happens. And I've noticed that. So I think there needs to be some type of, at least council rules, that we have some more flexibility to what it may look like. I don't know. And this is a workshop down the road. I think it's something we should discuss as a council. Any one of us could go rogue. We could. It happens. So,
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, do you want to separate the two?
yeah,
Make
kind
that
of.
a determination of what you'd like Peter to do with the summary, to work with Council Topaz's attorney, to provide him with what you give as direction.
Yep.
And then I can give you a summarization of some of the identified potential actions that you could do. They're limited.
Yeah.
But I can identify those to you, and then you can give us direction either now or later of a specific one that you want us to come back with some details on, or maybe there's a combination of things that you would like us to proceed that way. But I'd like Peter to get some finalization of what you want him to do on the first time. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I suggest that the council formally vote on whether you want to waive the privilege and produce the executive summary. So that would require a motion in the. So I move that we direct council to provide a redacted executive summary of the report, to make that available to council as
And maybe second to authorize Councilor Topaz's attorney to redact his version of the investigation, correct?
executive summary.
Executive summary. Executive summary.
Waiving the attorney's client
Waive
Waiving the attorney client
with respect to the executive summary.
with respect of the executive.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so moved. It
Well,
was already,
it's already,
it was already,
and
Yep.
Already moved.
so,
So discussion.
discussion.
Discussion, discussion, I'm getting concerned, you know, that, this, so Councilor Topaz and his legal counsel know that We are gonna release this to you. As of right now, nobody here in this city that I know of wants to. Is this gonna be a public record after this? Is that what we're making a motion on? Is that what we're making a motion on? Because it can go two ways. Either, because again, I'm not being political and being in front of stuff, Counselor Topaz and his council is being in front of stuff. If this is the case, are you going to, because I want to be out in front of this thing. I'm not gonna have some article written to the spotlight saying lies, lies, lies. We have done a thorough investigation. I can guarantee you that the city has. Very methodical, well thought out. Its findings are facts with video and multiple witnesses behind it. So if this is going to become public record, I have no issue with that, but we're going to be out in front of it immediately. And we'll just release it.
I have received a public records request from Council Topaz's attorney leading through it with potentially material responsible to that public records request.
So made a public records request, which will be processed through the administrative, whatever our policies are to release that. So who makes that decision? Is that the council make that decision to release that, or is that something a public information request?
Once all that is requested.
What I'm just saying, that's okay. So I'm not sure how, so that information, I'm not sure how that impacts on like what we're trying, it doesn't.
The question was, does it become a public record?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the question.
Okay.
By waiving the privilege, it likely becomes a public record that can be obtained by council.
Yeah.
Or by anybody that's willing to take public record.
And furthermore, we can let reporters know that we have, and here it is. That happens.
But
Yes,
it's,
that happens.
yeah.
Okay, so we have an executive summary that's been redacted, and we're approving the authorization of Counselor Topaz's counsel, who made a public records request for the ability to get it. And it's been motioned and seconded. Counselor Berkeley made the motion. Counselor Shelton seconded it. Counselor Topaz. I'm calling the vote.
Aye.
Counselor Berkeley.
Aye.
Morton.
Aye.
Counselor Shelton.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.
So you will release the executive summary with redaction. Council Topaz's attorney, without waiver of attorney-client privilege together material. So
I'd like to make a motion that we release the investigative report. Same manner.
I didn't hear that.
I made a motion to release the investigative report. The same motion, in the same way we have the redacted executive summary.
Does anybody want to second that?
I don't think it's appropriate. So that I think just the executive summary for now. If it becomes an issue, we can always readdress it, correct?
I don't think that's a good idea.
Right, but I'm saying if.
Yeah, I mean, there's because that opens up too many liabilities for individuals who have come to have come forward. I
There's a lot in there, Councilor Lopez, and there's a lot of really sensitive information in there. So I just don't believe that it's in anyone's best interest to release the whole thing.
I can't reply to that, I didn't see it. I mean, to me, it's nothing.
I understand that, and it's really
And that's
important.
why I asked. Well, fine, I mean, if you wanna hide it from me, do it, say, no second.
Motion dies, no second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, I'd like to make a motion that, well, I don't think you have, I can just direct you, I can just direct Bill to come back with us. I can't make a motion to that, you're right, so, but,
You want to hear what the potential options are for this mayor,
yes,
council, and then after hearing that, if you'd like to give us direction on any specific one or more or modifications, hybrids, we can have to give them that. Does that sound fair? Do I take a break before this? I'm ready to go. Keep going if you're ready.
yeah, let's go ahead. How long is this gonna take?
10 minutes.
Okay.
3 hours.
He doesn't care, like, yeah, I'll take a break.
Okay, so just to this is in no particular order, but I'm going to just make a quick mention of some of the things that I've identified by looking at your charter, your rules and procedures, and just that general knowledge of what do other communities have not to do. I mentioned before that dismissal by the council is not an option because we don't have the charter authorities to do that. The charter identifies what the council can do, and those are actions that are not initiated by the council. The council finds out that something has occurred, and then they take an action based on that. But actions that we're talking about in this investigation are not subject to that. Second is the public censure. As I mentioned, a member of the city council swears an oath to support the laws and faithfully perform the duties of being a city council member. And you've heard the investigation, you've come to your own conclusions as to whether Council Topaz has lived up to that. But in the future, you could add to that oath, and it could be supplemented with some additional standards, or you could create your own standards of what a city council member's roles and responsibilities are. Within your code, you say that there are responsibilities of decorum within council meetings. I don't find within that governing structure anything that refers to the responsibility of a council member in having good decorum in interactions with city employees, interactions, asking for documents or taking time from employees as opposed to making appointments and having some limitation. Some cities have identified rules and regulations on how much time a city council member can utilize of staff members, making requests for research or documentation. You can create those types of things. That's all background to, you don't have a lot of that right now, but that does not limit you in the ability to make a statement about what you have perceived and heard are issues that cause you to want to make a statement about a Council Topaz's action. So what you could do is you could do a public censure, and that public censure could be any of the following or a combination. You could have the council write a letter that is directed to Council Topaz, putting him on notice of what your concerns are and what your expectations are for the future. You could write a resolution, which would be a public document adopted by the city council that goes into the public record, available for all to see, that states whatever you choose to put into it, drawing attention to things that you're not comfortable with, you feel are inappropriate, and you feel need to be stopped, and the consequences of what happens if not. You could place such a resolution not only in the public record, you could put it on the city's website for a period of time, potentially a defined period would be my suggestion, as opposed to leaving it there forever. Because in our society, people have the opportunity to hear what their misdeeds might be, and then have an opportunity to change their actions in the future. So certainly there should be some time limitation. You could also issue a statement that's distributed within the city organization. That statement could be a recognition of what your findings have been and your support of city regulations and policies if you're concerned for the actions of an individual and perhaps a statement of your expectation that city employees feel comfortable making sure that such behavior by that council member or any other council member does not occur in the future.
Or any staff or any supervisors or anything like that. That's a great one, yes. Absolutely.
So you could create a process where there's a safe place for people to raise these issues. And you already have that in your policy. But you might want to remind people that that applies to city council members, that here's the process to do it. And it's, again, that it's a safe place, no retaliation, because it has to be that element, no retaliation. You could also take some steps on restriction of access. And what we've heard that there's been some issues of Council Topaz coming into an employee's workplace and dominating their time for a period of time, perhaps making requests that the staff member may have felt were either inappropriate or that they had to respond to because it was being made by a city council member. As you know, city employees know that you are all their ultimate bosses. The city administrator is their boss, but they don't have the opportunity to always go to the city administrator and say, can you step in and be the shield between this council member and me? So you might want to reiterate the policies. You may even want to create a restriction for the counselor for a period of time or some time, manner, and place restriction on what places that he has the right to be. And as you've already stated earlier in the evening, he has the right to voters have elected him to do his job. He has to be given the opportunity to participate in city council meetings. He has to have the opportunity to have access to public records and information to be able to do his job. But he doesn't have the ability to cross boundaries once you identify those boundaries. So we can do a better job of identifying what those boundaries are and perhaps for a defined period of time, put additional restrictions on the counselor because of the allegations that have been substantiated. You can also modify your governing policy. So within your governing policy, there's section 4 that says that each counselor is assigned to one or more city departments. Well, perhaps you want to revisit that policy. That was adopted by resolution. You could change it by resolution. You could make a determination, for instance, if you want to add some language that says that each council member is assigned one or more city departments if a council member has not been censured or reprimanded by the city council in the prior X number of months. So you might find that there's a performance standard that needs to be met based on some prior action. You again want to get the attention of that council member. That would require a change of your own rules. But you could apply that, and I'm not suggesting you can apply it retroactively, but if there is an issue that you have substantiated today, you can play this out.
Sure.
You could also say that each council member should have an assignment unless it's been sanctioned by the council for violating some specific activity or some specific policy. So the anti-harassment policy or misuse of government functions, whatever. But some other statement could be made that might also restrict the council members. But by changing the governing policy, you would be potentially modifying what each of your common role is, which is to be involved in a collaborative process with the city manager, the city administrator, for a specific department. You may find that there is a specific department that you feel very comfortable that Councilor Topaz can participate in. You might make that assignment. You can do that under today's resolution. But you may feel that there is none that are appropriate. And that's why I'm suggesting you make that. There is a process, now stepping out of which you have locally. But we mentioned before that there is a possibility that an action could rise to being something that the Oregon Government Ethics Commission might want to look at. Anyone can raise that issue. I'm not suggesting that the council do that. There's also a recall provision that Mary talked about, and that's under OAR 165.014-0005. There's a recall process that's established at the state level. And there's a recall manual that the Secretary of State's office has that anyone has access to online. They can look at that, they can determine if they want to initiate that. The council does not have the ability to initiate a recall. That is something that is exclusively the right of an individual voter who would choose to be the chief petitioner to raise some issue and then go out to gather signatures. The council's role would be if someone went through the process and obtained sufficient number of signatures, then it would go on a ballot. But that's within the term of office of the individual. A recall does not prohibit someone having the ability to run for office at a future date, but it is something that could be done. So I stated that there are some provisions that can be made to the governing policy. You can make some revisions also to your rules of conduct. You can have a more specific set of rules of conduct. Now, we're talking prospectively now as opposed to any discipline. But as a result of this action, you might decide we need to have a more clear list of the things you do and you don't do. And you may even create that list and say, we as a council are going to require that everyone sign it. I worked for a city that had a statement such as that, and every year, beginning of the year, all council members reviewed it, all 5 of them signed it, and we actually made it into a plaque that was on the wall with the signatures, so that you all can hold each other accountable for everyone being aware of the rules and responsibilities and that their actions are equal. You can also create your own sanctions. So I'm telling you tonight, there aren't a lot of sanctions that are within your policies that apply to council members, but you can decide as a body to create something short of dismissal. Now, you could revise the charter by vote of the people. And as I mentioned, in 2010, you had a measure that was defeated by the voters, but there was a provision within that had a statement that may or may not apply here. But just as an example, I'll read it to you so you can see that you can construct language that you can put before the voters that they may consider. That language was talking about the role of the city manager. But then it said, because it was changing the position from city administrator to city manager, then it said no council member may directly or indirectly attempt to coerce a manager or a candidate to the office of manager in the appointment or removal of any city employee or in administrative decisions regarding city property or contracts. Violation of this prohibition is grounds for removal from office by a majority of the council after a public hearing. In council meetings, councilors may discuss or suggest anything with the manager relating to city business. So that last statement was to say, by all means, talk to the city manager. Do it within the context of the council meeting, so all 5 council members can decide whether that's the direction that they want the city manager to take. But that individual involvement, coercion, direction would be inappropriate. But the voters didn't pass it. That doesn't mean that you can't consider that again against the voter approval. And those are basically my thoughts as I did some research for you tonight. As you know, we didn't talk about these in the prior meeting because it's a step-by-step process for you to get to this point to hear what those defined options are and the limitations of those options. And now for you, either tonight or at a future time, to tell us what would you like us to do. You can give directions to us on the staff, or you can take your own action and create your own drafts to consider how do you want to make whatever statement.
I'd certainly like to talk about it at our next meeting, possibly put it on our agenda and collaboratively make a decision of what we want to do.
Yeah, I like all the things that Bill had to say. I like the letter, the resolution, that the city is releasing it to all city staff, kind of, what's going on. Basically, the governing policy, I thought was really good, and maybe even revisit, what we require of one another, and what's okay and what's not okay, and maybe look at that a little more in depth, especially with this day and age. I take it very seriously, that we all are included, you know, the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, I definitely, that is, it's a different, we really need to look at it, so I like all that, except for the, you know, the recall, and you know, the charter maybe something to look at or discuss, I don't know, you know, but I like those right there, for sure, definitely some type of voting policy. Just a little something to go on.
I think those are probably longer term. Definitely, we should put them as a way of modifying governing policy with changes to rules, conduct, and those things definitely should have for longer term. But sort of the immediate ones would be the possible central statement, the restrictions of access. Are we talking about asking for guidance to consider as early as tomorrow?
Talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, we can start.
We can talk about it tomorrow if we wanted to. I would like to know a little bit more about what restrictions would look like. I don't think we can get drawn up between now and tomorrow evening.
Yeah. Okay.
It's definitely something that you would want to get the staff involved in because they understand the physical limitations of creating.
Because we have to allow a person to do their job.
Absolutely. So I guess though, in terms of some immediacy, so that as Matt Brown was asking his statement, and I imagine other employees are wondering, is that what kind of, I mean, we will discuss this, but would it behoove us to make some kind of statement or declaration saying that we are fully committed to following through with things that to ensure a safe workplace, and that behaviors will not be tolerated, but give us some time to make the specific.
Yeah, I think that would probably be appropriate is to, maybe even talk about, we'll put on our agenda for not tomorrow, but of course, May 7th, I think it is. And May 5th, okay, May 5th. May 5th meeting, and it's gonna take, I'm sure, some time to do the executive redact all the names out of that, right? So
Yeah, that shouldn't take that long, but the executive summary has less than it, so.
okay, but and just that way we can have that maybe ready and give it to them, so we have it. I want to receive at the same time that his council. If his council gets it, I want it equally the same day. So I'm shooting for that day. It would just be easier. So I think that's fair. All fairness aside, that is just the way of Ravine is completely 100% fair. So I personally would like to have a copy in case I get confronted.
We can probably commit to doing that by Friday or Monday.
I would feel more comfortable with making sure that that has been reviewed by Council Lopez before we move forward. And giving myself a chance to look over all of our options. Look into that. I have no idea what you said, so I'm gonna have to do some research.
But could you just bring us some ideas and maybe direct you to work with staff just on a couple ideas, maybe general.
What I can do tomorrow is I can take the notes I read from and I can submit those to you all. So you all see what I've come up with. But again, the specifics, I'm leaving the specifics to you to give direction because we follow your guidance for what your decision.
Okay. Scott, would you like to make a comment?
Well, I I was wondering if that redacted executive summary was available to.
You want to be on the list?
It would be, would I receive a copy
You absolutely
on the
can be on
same
the
day
list.
that? Okay. So, okay, so that would be available.
That's the council's decision.
As public record.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yep. What I can say is that we did try to go other routes. We tried to allow to do this a little bit different way that it's going, is what it seems like. For anybody who's watching, they just need to know that we absolutely tried. And I just, before we adjourn, it's been a long night, is there anything else, council, that we need to discuss that you need me to keep this meeting going any longer? No?
Nothing from my perspective.
Okay, so, and moving forward, I just again like to personally, for this entire council, apologize to Matt Brown for what happened tonight as well.
And others.
And the others, yes, but Matt's name, and again, I apologize, and we definitely want everybody to feel safe and comfortable, and we appreciate all the work that our city staff and boards and commissions, because they're all part of us, do. So with that,